right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Daily Power Parsha. It is great to see you all here with me today. So we have another doubleheader. Can you imagine? So many doubleheaders going on in the last few weeks. Again, we do this when we don't have a Jewish leap year. When we don't have a Jewish leap year, there are not enough weeks or Shabbats to get all the Torah portions in if you just read one at a time. So we have ones that go together, groupings. So this week, we're exploring two portions, Behar and Bechukotai. These are the last two portions in the book of Leviticus. So we're going to start from the beginning. You know, we do these Monday mornings. We typically explore the reading for Sunday and Monday. The opening of the first of the two portions, Behar, is really powerful. And I wanted to share that with you right now. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Oops. Share screen. All right, and you should see in just a moment, you should see the Torah reading pop up. Here we go. Torah reading for Behar-Bechukotai. Here's what you need to know. The opening of Behar, the first of the two portions, opens up with the laws regarding Shemitah. What is Shemitah? Shemitah is the sabbatical year. This is an agricultural law in the land of Israel that actually is still applicable even today. Pretty surprising maybe, but it's a law. If you're a farmer in the land of Israel, and when I say the land of Israel, I mean the original borders of the land of Israel, and you have crops that grow, you have an obligation for Shemitah even today. So let's explore this inside. I'm going to start reading. Oh, let me make this a little bit bigger. Let me zoom in so it's easier to read. Here we go. Chapter 25, Leviticus. And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them," so this is the message, "when you come to the land that I'm giving you, the land shall rest a Sabbath to the Lord." So again, this mitzvah only kicks in when you come to the land that I'm giving you. In other words, in the land of Israel. As long as you are still wandering in the desert, or at a later point, if you go outside of the land of Israel, if you own a farm in, I don't know, Iowa. There are farms in Iowa? Are we assuming yes? Iowa? Why not? Okay, so if you have a farm elsewhere, this does not apply. This is only an Israel, it's a land-based law. So it's really about the land. Now, a person is obligated to do this, but the chov, the obligation, is on the land itself. Which land? The land of Israel. And what's the law? I love how it gives away the punchline at the beginning. What is the law? Sabbath. A Sabbath for the land. The land shall rest a Sabbath. What does that mean? So verse 3 explains. You may sow your field for 6 years. 6 years you plant. 6 years you plow. 6 years you do all the stuff that farmers do. And for 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in its produce. So fields and vineyards are worked for 6 years. But verse 4 says, on the 7th year, hey Karen, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Okay, but as the Torah continues, on the 7th year, the land shall have a complete rest. A Sabbath to the Lord, you shall not sow your field, nor shall you prune your vineyard. So no working the field, no working the vineyards, no grapes, no grape juice, no wine, no wheat, no flour, no nothing. What do you do with the actual field? So what are you supposed to be doing with it? Take a look at what the Torah says. By the way, there are field experts. Let me say that again in normal language. Like farmers and agricultural experts who say that the notion of letting the land rest, to lay fallow, is tremendously beneficial for the field. You're not trying to suck out every, last crop that you can get from it. You let it go for a year and you kind of reset the ecosystem. But I digress. Let's get back to this. You shall not, verse 5, you shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest. You shall not pick the grapes you would set aside for yourself, for it shall be a year of rest for the land. Take a look. So what should you do with the stuff that actually grows? because the land may grow, even if you're not working it, the land may grow of its own. So what do? The Torah explains, the produce of the Sabbath of the land shall be yours to eat for you, for your male and female slaves, servants, and for land that are in your land, which means everyone else. Okay, so that's the sabbatical year. That is Shemitah. Now Shemitah, this mitzvah, the Hebrew word is Shemitah. This mitzvah is repeated a few times in Torah, with some more details here, some more details there. So I'm giving you kind of the overall picture. 6 years you're working your field. The 7th you don't work the field. Whatever grows is up for grabs. Anyone can have it. Anyone can keep it. So this opening mitzvah of our Torah portions, Behar-Bechukotai, teaches us some incredible lessons. But before we get to the lessons, I need to point out an anomaly. Because if you look at the opening verse that I glossed over before, which states kind of the preamble, and the Lord spoke to Moses, it gives a setting. It gives a place. It says the Lord spoke to Moses where? On Mount Sinai. The question is, why does it suddenly talk about Mount Sinai? The Jews had been far removed from Mount Sinai. They had been traveling, they had been wandering, they built a Mishkan. What's going on that God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai? Why is this mentioned at Mount Sinai? Why is Sinai associated with this mitzvah? Rashi explains. Rashi gives a beautiful commentary and he says, the Torah is teaching us, just like this mitzvah, the Shemitah, that has a written code that you read here in the verses, and it also has an extensive oral code. All of these details that we know from Moses, just like, so the Torah says, all of these details were given to Moses at Mount Sinai. Just like this mitzvah and all its details were given at Mount Sinai, even though we're not talking about the 10 Commandments. That happened a book and a half ago, right? We're far removed from that. But although it unfolds now we're learning about Shemitah. Mazel Tov, now we're learning about this new law called the sabbatical year. The Torah is telling us you should know this may be new to you, but it was told to Moses on Mount Sinai with all its details. So to every mitzvah in Torah was taught to Moses on the mountain at Mount Sinai with all the details, even if it appears in the book of Leviticus or the book of Numbers or the book of Deuteronomy. It doesn't matter when it appears. The entire Torah was taught to Moses on Mount Sinai. I hope that point is coming across. Rashi says, just like this mitzvah with all its details were stated to God, as the Torah itself says, on Mount Sinai, so to every mitzvah with all of its details, they were all taught to Moses on Mount Sinai. They unfold as the Torah unfolds, right? As things happen, more things are transmitted from Moses to the people, but all of this was given on Mount Sinai. Remember Moses went up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights? Remember that? Remember after the revelation at Sinai, 10 Commandments, Moses goes up the mountain for 40 days, 40 nights. What do you think he was doing there? What, like skiing? Oh, the slopes on Sinai, tremendous. That was a joke. What was Moses doing on top of the mountain? He was getting the law from God. And then when he came down, remember we were doing the whole golden calf thing, dancing the hora over there? Yeah, that was that after the 40 days and 40 nights. But what did Moses get? Moses got the whole shebang. Now, why is this detail mentioned in reference to the sabbatical year? The Torah could have seemingly used this construct that God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, reference to any mitzvah that unfolds later, and from that mitzvah we would have learned out this detail that all the mitzvah were taught at Mount Sinai. Why specifically this mitzvah of Shemitah at this Torah portion, Behar? Why is this one the one from which we learn that all of the mitzvot were taught at Sinai? Why is this the instructive one for all mitzvot? You understand my question? From this mitzvah and this reference of Mount Sinai, we learned that all mitzvot were taught at Sinai. Okay, why is this the model one? Why is this used as the model lesson for all the other mitzvot? The Rabbi gives a beautiful explanation. What is the sabbatical year all about? Sabbatical year is about you work your field for 6 years, 7th year you don't. How are you going to eat? And not only how are you going to eat the 7th year if everyone else eats your food, right? If everyone has access to my field, I don't have any more ownership. How am I going to eat or ensure that I eat? Number one. Number two, how's it going to grow the next year? If I'm not plowing, sowing, pruning, whatever it is, again, all these farm terms that I'm not familiar with, if I'm not working my field in year 7, How is it going to grow year one of the next cycle, the next year? How's that going to happen? If you don't plant, you don't reap. It's the way it is, right? If you're not sowing your field, what's going to grow? So I'm not planting, I'm not plowing, I'm not doing anything in my field. I'm not tending the field at all. Year 7, and the next year, what's going to happen? How are you going to eat? So the Torah, the mitzvah of Shemitah, is an exercise in trust in God. The question is, who's in control? Is nature in control? Are my farming skills in control? Is the plow in control? Are the seeds in control, or is God in control? You probably know my answer, right? You probably know my answer, right? God is in control. So there are very few mitzvot that test a person's that test a person's faith and trust in God as the Shemitah year. You know, on Shabbat, right, every week we have a mini sabbatical. Well, we have a sabbatical, right? One day off. But you know what? To be honest, that's easier than the Shemitah year. Because this is a whole year. This is a full year. This is not just one day a week. I'm not minimizing the challenge of Shabbat. And it's a similar thing, right? Where we trust in God that although we're only working 6 days, God will provide. Okay, but this is a whole year. And if you're a farmer, that's it. That's all you have. That's literally your bread and butter. So you're telling me that for a full year, I don't own my field more than the other guy, and I can't work my field, prep my field, heal my field. I can do nothing to my field, and you expect me to survive? I'm not playing the market, right? I'm not buying Bitcoin. What do you want me to do? I'm a farmer. Let it go. And how am I going to eat? And if you should say, the Torah itself addresses the question. Verse 20. And if you should say, what will we eat in the 7th year? We will not sow and we will not gather in our produce. How are we going to eat? We're not working the field. It's not ours. Know then, God says in verse 21, that I will command my blessing for you in the 6th year. And it will yield produce for 3 years. It'll be enough for year 6, that year. 7, you'll store up for 7. And year 1 of the next cycle. 3 years of produce in year 6, God says. If you keep the mitzvah of Shemitah, I got you covered. I got your back, God says. Here's the question. Very rarely does the Torah itself get into the psyche of the human being reading Torah. Very rarely does it get so meta to say, and if you're going to wonder, how's it going to work out? Don't worry, I got this. I don't think there's any other case in Torah where it gets like that, into your head. The Torah just tells you what to do typically. Here it's getting into the human head, into the human brain. This is what you're going to be thinking. Don't worry, I promise I'll take care of you. You know what this is like? You know those team building exercises? Where you create trust in your fellows, and you have to fall backwards and trust that they're going to catch you. You know what I'm talking about? I've never done those, but I've seen I don't know, who knows? I've seen that. Theoretically, we all believe in God. Yeah, why not? Sure. Belief and trust, I've explained this many times. Belief and trust are very different. Belief is, yeah, sure, God could do anything. Why not? But trust is, I'm banking on it. I'm falling back and I have no other way other than God catching me. This is it. That's my safety line. I'm bungee jumping. God is my cord. I don't believe that God could do it. I'm betting the bank on it. Shemitah is betting. Well, actually, forget betting the bank. We got to go betting the farm, right? I think that's what you do anyway. You bet the farm. It's betting the farm on God. It's saying, God, I know you got me. I'm not working this field year 7. You got me. You're going to take care of me. That's huge. That's why the Torah says this is the mitzvah at Mount Sinai. From here we learned that everything was taught at Sinai. But why is this the model lesson? Because there's no other mitzvah that tests your faith in God, Divine revelation from here to tomorrow. Yeah, we were inspired at Mount Sinai. Sure you were. Does it translate to the bottom line? That's the question. You might have been inspired by the mountain. Oh, you saw a light show, you heard God talking, you were moved. How moved were you? Were you moved that you're actually going to bank on it? Are you actually going to put your literal finances and food? Are you going to trust in God or not? It's easy to say you were blown away. I'm so inspired. Mount Sinai, oh, I can't even describe to you how true God is now. How true is God? Are you ready to bank on it? That's the question. So there's no other mitzvah like Shemitah. Shemitah and Shabbat. Because they're the same thing essentially. But Shemitah is very dramatic. It was a whole year, full year. So Shemitah is the model lesson for what it means to believe in God or to trust in God. You're at Sinai, you believe it's true, you trust in God. Sure you do. Are you ready to not work for a year? Are you ready? With no backup plan. That's it. Does God have you? That's the question. And when the Jews trusted, they were hooked up. When they cut corners, no one's going to notice if I plant a little something here. Cut corners, and it didn't work out. All right, so that's the first lesson I wanted to share. I mentioned, Karen, go ahead.
I was trying to use the mouse for my work computer for this. I mean,
I know the feeling. Trust me.
All right, so I get, yeah, right. I mean, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that one's not operating this one. So I get it, but I would say that their faith was tested when they, if you talk about the Paschal Lamb and you talk about the Exodus from Egypt. So I'm wondering, not to dispute, but to add to maybe, is that this is actually, we're talking about when they enter the land.
Right.
Right. So
right.
At that point, that is, like while they're in the desert, there is this, the Shekinah, the God is showing.
Yes.
Himself.
Easier to trust when your whole existence is trust-based. You're in a very important point that Karen is saying. Exactly. Karen, I agree with you 100%. When you're in a miraculous setting of the desert, so you're more inclined to trust. But when you get to Israel and the miracles stop, and now you have to fend for yourself. Per divine command, God says, now work the field. Are you still going to trust the miracles? Or will you say, you know what? I gotta pull my own weight. Yeah. But excellent point. You're right. In the desert, their whole existence was miraculous. They were eating manna from heaven every day. Every day they had this experience. You know what? Let me add on to your point and say that maybe we can say that eating manna for 40 years, food that wasn't able to be stored for the next day, which means that you went to sleep at night with no food in your house, right? So that was a training ground. That was like a training ground for what would become the Jewish story once they got into Israel. Right? Now, you're on your own. No manna from heaven. If you want food, you got to work the field. You got to be a farmer. Or you got to buy it, whatever. Now, at this point, that you have to work at it, do you still trust in God? That was a training ground that we should always trust in God, but certainly that's when it becomes difficult. I mentioned before that this mitzvah of Shemitah applies even today in the land of Israel. You may not know this, but even today, religious farmers will not work their fields, sell their produce from the 7th year. It's not easy to be a religious farmer in the land of Israel, unless you trust, and maybe you have a side gig. Can't go wrong with a side gig. Anyway, but yeah, it's and produce that comes from Israel to America. By the way, the next sabbatical year is 5782. So we're right now 5780. We have 2 more years to the sabbatical year. Just in case you're wondering, in case you're wanting to get into farming, you may want to wait 3 years. But anyway, so...
do they all go to a lot for the year? I mean, they go to the beach?
Why not? What else are you going to do? You're not working the field. Might as well party. Might as well go to the beach. But it's interesting because when you buy food from produce from Israel, so from religious farmers, it'll have a hechsher. It'll have a certification on it saying this is not from the Shemitah year. Like around the Shemitah, the 7th year, it'll come with that disclaimer, that certification saying, it's kosher. It's not from 7th year. It's from 6th year. Or in the next year that it's the new stuff from year 1 and not from last year 7. Anyway, that's some interesting points about it. I wanted to go back also because I jumped to show you how the Torah kind of preempts the concern that we might have. I feel like there was one other point that I wanted to show you in the first reading. Quickly. Oh yeah, the Jubilee year. You thought 7th year is wild. Check this out. Every 7 sevens, right? Every 7 years is a 50th year. So you do 7 years, but 7 cycles of that, and now you have the 50th year. Right? And you shall count for yourself 7 sabbatical years, 7 years times 7, which is 49. I love how the Torah does the math for us. In case you're wondering, 7 times 7 is 49 years. Math hasn't changed in 3,300 years. It's good to know. It's good to know. Although Rabbi Yaffe would, I'm sure, have something about that as well. Something about the math. The answer is not the question. So, proclaim shofar blast, Day of Atonement. Okay, Yom Kippur gets involved here. But here, take a look at this. You shall sanctify the 50th year. And the 50th year, freedom for all slaves throughout the land. Jubilee year. Each man shall return to his property, each man to his family. Unbelievable ideas. Wild ideas. Unheard of. Unheard of. Let me first explain what's going on here. 7 times 7 is 49. So that means that in the 49th year, you would have a normal sabbatical year, right? Because that's the 7th year of that cycle, right? You're 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, and 49. These are 7 years. These are all sabbatical years. Year 49 is a sabbatical year. Guess what? Year 50, boom, double whammy, double header. You with me on this? Year 49 is a sabbatical year. Year 50 is the Jubilee year. You also don't have any rights over the land. Actually, 50 is 1, but then 1 and 2. I hope you're with me on this count. Or maybe not. Maybe the count starts after the 50th year. I'm not sure. But here's the point. There's a lot of blessing that needs to go in to help us keep that Jubilee year, the 50th year. But what else happens? In addition to the extra dose of faith, 7 times 7 faith, that is that the slaves go free. Typically, slaves. First of all, you need to know that although Judaism has a notion, Jewish law, biblical law, has a notion of slaves, it's not at all like the slavery that we've abolished. Why? Because slavery in Judaism is not you do whatever you want with your slave. It's more like a butler or a servant or somebody that's working for you in the house, somebody that lives with you that works for you. It's not, you can't give them demeaning work, you can't treat them horribly, you can't obviously cause physical damage. The moment you touch the slave, physically, is the moment that by Jewish law they go free. In other words, they don't work for you anymore. Like you cannot employ, again, the word slave in Hebrew, in English, is a misnomer because slave means something in our language that doesn't mean the same thing in Torah law. But nonetheless, that's the way it's always translated because the Hebrew word is eved, which for some reason is translated as slave, even though it's not. But I digress. But I mean, so you cannot physically abuse or touch or in any way demean the slave. You cannot give this individual harsh labor or any work that's not respectful. You cannot even have food. They cannot have different food than you have. In other words, you have to give them the food that you eat. It can't be like one food for you and one food for them. If you only have one pillow, one blanket, whatever, it goes to them before you. So, I mean, these are things that are unheard of when you think of slavery, the way slavery was, right, in its horrific state. This is not at all the same thing, but for some reason it's translated as slave and slavery, whatever, it's a misnomer. Here's the point. No matter what, a slave would go free after a certain number of years. If the slave still wanted to stick around because the slave was enjoying the family and the situation, the slave could choose to do so. But on the 50th year, automatically the slave would go free no matter what. The Torah has an automatic escape clause, or not escape
Rabbi,
clause. Yes.
what if he didn't want to go? Isn't there something where you hammer something through his ear?
Yeah, you do an ear piercing, and the message is, it's not for pain. It's just to indicate that the ear that heard God say at Sinai that you are my servants, God says, which means don't be a servant to another human being. This person needs to get that message and should not be looking to stay, serving another human being. By the way, this affects Jewish labor law. I know it sounds like I'm talking something from left field, but all of this discussion affects Jewish labor law. At what point does a job become servitude? Which is not okay. It becomes servitude if you cannot quit your job. Which is why Judaism says at any point, no matter what, you are always allowed to quit your job. Even if you sign a contract, even if there's an agreement, even if there's a clause, it does not matter. The worker is always entitled to quit. Now, at the same time, the employer doesn't have to pay for the work that's not done, but the employer is never allowed to force someone to do work. Not allowed to. Not allowed to. It's against Jewish labor law. Let me get back from that parenthesis. So in the 50th year, things are resetting. Everyone, and by the way, the 50th year is not 50 from when you started, or 50 from when a certain arrangement was made. 50 is an objective year on the calendar, or on the whatever. It's, if somebody becomes a slave or whatever it is in year 49, well, that's just going to be for 1 year, because year 50 is year 50. So in year 50, things reset. It's kind of like the old Etch-a-Sketch, where no matter what you drew, no matter what lines, connections, no matter what you did, you shake it up and everything goes back, everything is reset. So human beings, everyone now works for themselves. Once again, there's no slaves, no servants, etc. Number 2, all the land that was bought, sold, returns back to its tribal ancestry. To explain this, when the Jews went to the land, all this is Israel-based, right? This is all for Israel. When the Jews went to the land of Israel, each tribe got an allocation of land, kind of like the United States divided into states and territories. So like New York is there, and Pennsylvania is there, and Virginia is there, and West Virginia is there, and North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. I don't know, I'm just kind of going down. But whatever, I know I missed a few states. But every place has a state as its own territory. The Jews also, the tribes, 12 tribes, 12 different states. What happens if somebody from another tribe buys property in the other tribe? Are you allowed to cross-tribe purchase land? The answer is yes. Yes. But in the 50th year, it all resets. It all goes back. Why? Because there was a notion that the tribes should have their territory. Because what happens if the tribe of Reuven, they strike a rich, and now they're buying up all the property. Now they're blurring the line. So 50 years, the Etch-a-Sketch, which means that you would only purchase it for 50 years. Or until that 50th year. I hope I'm being clear here. You would never pay full price for a property because you knew that in year 50, whenever that was going to come, whether it's in 50 years, or 40 years, or 30 years, or 10 years, or 1 year, you knew that at that point you would lose ownership over it. So it's only a temporary purchase of the land. Does that make sense what I'm saying? You're only leasing the land temporarily in Israel, because it's always going to reset in the 50th year. So that itself is instructive, which tells us that we don't own anything. We think we own. Oh no, I don't. It's not. I own the house. Yeah, outright, no mortgage. Own the house.
So, Rabbi Ari, so religious farmers, who are they signing the lease with?
No, not today. That's because today we don't have that tribal. That tribal division. That's already been blurred. But in ancient times, in the land of Israel, when I'm not sure when it ended, this whole thing. Probably with the end of the temple, it probably ended then. But no, we don't have this particular piece. We have the sabbatical year piece with the farms, but not this land leasing. But in essence, the Torah is telling us, I think, kind of a lesson in life. We're not permanent residents. No matter how eternal we think we are, physically we're not eternal. Spiritually, the soul is eternal. But physically, we never own something forever. So, it's a lesson in life. Who's the real owner? God's the real owner. Right? Okay, I'm going to close this out in the next 60 seconds. I just want to mention a few more things. So again, the lesson that I hope it's coming out clear from this idea of the land returning back to its roots is that we're not permanent owners of the land. And in truth, it's not only in ancient times, but even today, we don't own permanently this world. We're here, we're visitors. And we try to make the best of the pieces of earth that we come in contact with. But we should never be so arrogant to think that I own this and this is mine and that's it, because God's in control. We're just temporary passers-by. A few quick things. Verse 17, very important. You shall not wrong one man his fellow Jew. That's referring to... Okay, there's two things that it says. When you make a sale or purchase, you shall not wrong one another. And it says again, you shall not wrong one person to the other. It says fellow Jew here, but we can expand it to everybody. Here's the point. When you buy or sell, the idea of not wronging the other means don't price gouge. I know this is a very current topic with masks and gloves. And I know that Attorney General in New York came down on some folks that were hoarding medical supplies and bumping up the prices. You should know the Torah says that you are not allowed to price gouge. This verse 14, you shall not wrong another, means you cannot charge more than 1/6 of the normative market price. You're allowed to make a profit, yeah, and you're allowed to get it in Jewish law. What happens if you go to a yard sale and they're selling off, paintings, and you happen to know that that's an original Picasso? Now, how come the owner doesn't know that? Who knows? Maybe it's their grandparents' house and they found it and they're like, there's no way that's an original Picasso. That's ridiculous. And you know, because you're an art person, you know it is, and they're selling it for $10, and you don't say anything. You buy it for $10, and now it's worth $1 million. Legal? In America, it's absolutely legal. You got a deal. You got a bargain. You got like a once-in-a-lifetime situation. They have these shows, antique shows where they come up, right? Antique road show or whatever it is. It's a whole thing. It's a business. People in Jewish law, it's a question. Are you allowed to do that? Because you're taking advantage of another person's ignorance. Yeah, in America we say, listen, buyer beware and seller beware. But in Judaism, there's a different standard. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you can either, by the way. I'm saying it's a question which requires further study, which we can't get into right now. The last point is, when it says here, don't wrong one another, it means by giving advice. Oftentimes we're asked to give advice, and people give advice that ends up benefiting themselves. In other words, people give self-serving advice. The person's asking for their benefit, but we're giving advice that really benefits us. The Torah says, don't be tricky. Don't be tricky. If somebody else is asking you advice, it can only be for their best interest. It should not be for us in a way that kind of manipulates them. And then it says, you shall fear your God. Why does it add that, as Rashi points out? Because a person might say, no, I only meant for their best interest in mind. That it happened to benefit me, I wasn't even thinking that. You can always say that. But fear God. God knows what your intention was. God knows what was in your heart and in your mind. When somebody is asking for advice, let's make it about them and give them unbiased advice. Let's not make it about us. Okay, that's a lot of insights for today. There's so many things to talk about. This is just like the opening of the Torah portion. We're going to continue tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel. So the main points that I hopefully you'll come away with are, number one, the extent of the trust in God that we are encouraged to have. Trust, not just theoretical belief, but actual trust. We're not usually asked on that level like this, like the Shemitah year, sabbatical year, but if and when it happens, we should have that trust. And God says, God's big enough to deliver on our trust. So let's trust in God. We explored the notion of things resetting and the fact that we're not permanent owners of the land. We spoke about treating others honestly and not taking advantage of a lack of information on the other. Yes, I could profit tremendously, but it still might not be right. And the Torah always holds us to a higher standard than just greed. I've mentioned this before, although the Torah economic model is akin to capitalism, it's not socialism, but it's still compassionate capitalism. It's ethical capitalism. It's capitalism with heart and soul and compassion and concern and empathy. So yes, I could make a killing here, but is it right? Is it right? Torah says if it's not right, you can't do it.
Rabbi Ari, ask all of those vendors in the shuk in Jerusalem about.
By the way, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. I don't want to mention. I don't want to get specific, but I've been to places, tourist places, where there are Jewish-owned, Israeli-owned beach shops selling souvenirs and T-shirts and everything. I was there a number of years ago in Key West, and I remember the guy. I was in yeshiva with them. We were in Miami. We were visiting the Chabad house in Key West, and we were going there to wrap tefillin with these guys, to do a mitzvah with them. And they were telling us, these tourists that come off the cruises, they tell them that they put gold on the, they have gold foil stamp, like gold foil stamping on the T-shirts. They press the shirts in the shop. They tell them that it's actual gold, and they charge $200 a T-shirt. And these foreign tourists, they pay it. Many of them. Again, I'm not. My intention is not to whatever, but. I think Torah would say something about that, and it might not give it. I don't think it would thumbs up it. It's not right. First of all, lying is never right, never okay, and second of all, taking advantage of someone's lack of knowledge about the reality of a product is not kosher. There has to be disclosure. We
need to be human.
Yeah, listen, I'll tell you this. Torah does not believe in a strict caveat emptor, in buyer beware. I don't need to disclose. If you figure it out, if I'm selling my car, I'm not going to tell you all the defects. You figure it out. Again, I don't know if Torah, the Bible itself, will tell you exactly how detailed to get, but to hide things may not be so kosher. Anyway. Look, it affects all of us to an extent, whether we're a seller or a buyer. These are practical laws that arise from our Torah portion. Whoever says that Torah is antiquated or old-fashioned or out of touch, doesn't relate to the modern world, has never really studied Torah. Because if you study Torah, you suddenly realize how there's a lot of wisdom for some very modern considerations, right? Very modern questions about ethics, morality, right and wrong, disclosure, privacy versus disclosure. These are topics here. All right, great to see you all tonight. As a reminder, tonight is our third session of miracles. You are going to be blown away by tonight's discussion. Tonight we explore the nature of nature, and nature is not at all what it looks like. That's all I can say for right now. So join me tonight for miracles, 7:30 p.m. We got some stuff coming up. Tonight is also Lag BaOmer. Don't forget.
Why is that hard?
Don't forget, tonight is Lag BaOmer, and Lag BaOmer is a very special day. It's a day of celebration. It's a day of Kabbalah. It's a day of joy and music and bonfires and bow and arrow and barbecues. When people were social back in the day. But either way, it's a day of celebration and Kabbalistic study. So I wish you a happy Lag. Lag BaOmer means the 33rd day of the Omer. Enjoy your Lag BaOmer. Yeah, Karen.
So isn't there like a parade or something?
Yes. Yes, there is a Chabad car parade. Let's see this. Let's find out when it is. I will be part of it. Facebook. Let's see, Facebook Chabad Intown Atlanta. Let's see what's going on.